At my father's funeral, Sophie wore grief like a designer dress, flawless, tailored, meant to be admired. She clung to Luke's arm, her newest trophy, the man I'd once loved and foolishly believed was mine. Her smirk curved slow and deliberate as she caught my eye, savoring the final triumph she thought she held. I braced for the gloating I knew was coming, but just as her lips parted, the air shifted, heavy, electric. Heads turned. And there he was, my husband, tall and composed, walking in like a ghost summoned by unfinished business. The color drained from Sophie's face, her grip on Luke faltering, while my mother's eyes went wide with disbelief. It was the first time in my life I watched them all stumble. The next morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly. 56 missed calls from my mother. Panic, desperation. But I didn't answer, not yet. There was power in making them wait. Before I take you deeper into this story, thank you for being here. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one, like your story was written in the shadows, this one's for you. Growing up, Sophie was the sun, bright, golden, impossible to ignore. And me? I was the shadow clinging to her heels, existing only in the spaces where her light didn't reach. I learned young that brilliance didn't matter if it wasn't wrapped in beauty. At 10, I built a solar-powered car for the science fair, staying up for weeks perfecting every gear and wire. First place. The trophy gleamed in my hands. But that same night, Sophie stumbled through a school play, forgetting half her lines, smiling that syrupy smile. Mom and Dad beamed like she'd won an Oscar. "You're going to be something special, kiddo," Dad chuckled, ruffling her hair. I sat 2 rows back, my trophy heavy in my lap, my heart heavier still. No one looked. No one noticed. I went to bed clutching that trophy like it could fill the hollow ache inside me. It didn't. Years blurred by until Luke. He wasn't perfect, forgetful, distracted, but when he laughed, really laughed, it made me feel seen. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd found someone who chose me. I brought him home, desperate for them to see me through his eyes. Dinner smelled like garlic and roasted chicken. Mom used her best china, the ones she dusted off for real guests. Sophie sat across the table, golden hair catching the candlelight like she was born for the stage. Luke's knee pressed against mine, steady, warm, and I let myself hope. Then she turned it on, that laugh, too loud, too practiced. "Luke, you're hilarious," Sophie purred, leaning in, her hand brushing his. I watched the flicker, his blush, his gaze. I'd seen that look before. She knew exactly what she was doing. She always did. "Sophie, stop," I hissed, my voice sharp but quiet, meant only for her. She met my glare with a sugary smile, tilting her head like it was all so innocent. But I knew better. That night, something inside me snapped, and I learned that even shadows have teeth. "Relax, Kate. You're being dramatic," Sophie laughed, flashing me that syrupy, sweet smile that always made my stomach churn. "I'm just being friendly. Don't be paranoid." My voice trembled as I turned to Mom, desperate for backup. "She's flirting with Luke. It's not okay." But Mom barely glanced my way, her sigh heavy with annoyance, like I was a child whining over spilled milk. "Don't make a fuss, Kate. Sophie's just having fun. You always overreact." She turned back to the sink, water splashing loudly against china, drowning me out. Dad didn't even lower his newspaper. Luke left me on a Tuesday, one of those gray, miserable days where the sky presses down on you and the rain falls steady, like the universe itself is mocking you. He stood in the middle of my apartment, shoulders hunched, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his eyes darting everywhere but at me. "I'm sorry, Kate," he whispered, voice so low it barely felt real. "It's Sophie. She's different, exciting." The words sliced through me, sharp and unforgiving. I refused to cry, not for him. Not now. I stared at the man who'd once traced dreams into my palms, who'd made me believe I was enough. "You're choosing her?" I asked, my voice a raw whisper. He swallowed hard, guilt flickering in his eyes. But not enough. Never enough to change his mind. And just like that, he turned and left. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing my fate. Outside, the rain swallowed his footsteps, and I sat frozen in the too-quiet room, staring at the space where he'd stood. The tap, tap, tap of rain against the window matched the slow, painful shattering of my heart. I wanted to scream, to break something, anything. But instead, I just sat there, hands trembling, breath shallow. And then came the rage, burning low and steady as I thought of Sophie. Her smirk, her victory, how she'd taken him just because she could. And my parents, who let her. I don't remember the drive to their house, just the rain streaking the windshield like the world was crying with me. I burst through the front door, drenched, chest heaving. "Luke left me," I gasped, "for Sophie." I waited, desperate, for them to care. Mom frowned, but not at Sophie, at me. "Kate, Sophie deserves to be happy. Luke made his choice. You'll find someone else." That was it. The moment I knew I didn't belong. I left that night, the rain pounding against the roof, as if trying to drown out my existence. I scribbled a note, the ink smudging where my hand trembled. "I'm gone. Don't call." The drive to the city blurred past, headlights slicing through the dark, the rain washing everything behind me clean. The apartment I found was tiny, walls thin enough to hear every argument next door, the floor creaking under every step. But it was mine. I took a job at a greasy diner, balancing plates with shaking hands, the smell of coffee and burnt bacon clinging to me. The tips were small, the hours long, but it didn't matter. I was free. I started therapy. Megan's voice was soft, steady, a lullaby I didn't know I needed. "You're not invisible, Kate," she told me. "You're just finally learning to see yourself." I wanted to believe her. I came back, week after week, peeling back layers I didn't know existed, talking about Mom, Dad, Sophie, the prison I'd called home for so long. "You're allowed to be angry," Megan said, her eyes warm, unwavering. And I was. I felt it all, the rage, the grief, the betrayal. But somewhere, buried beneath it, was the first flicker of hope. One night I found my old camera buried in a box. The lens was dusty, the grip unfamiliar, but the weight of it felt right. I aimed it at the city skyline, blurred by rain and neon lights, and clicked. It was like breathing again. I started capturing everything. The cracks in the pavement, stray cats slinking through alleys, the flicker of the diner's neon sign. Each photo felt like reclaiming a piece of myself lost in Sophie's shadow. I didn't know it then, but that camera would change everything. Meanwhile, Sophie was marrying Luke. I saw the photos online, her radiant in white, Luke beaming beside her. Mom and Dad stood close, their faces glowing with pride, the kind of pride they'd never shown me. But I didn't cry, not this time, because for the first time, I wasn't watching from the shadows. I was building a life where they couldn't reach me, and I was just getting started. The church overflowed with flowers, roses, lilies, delicate white blooms draped over every pew, like a scene torn from a fairy tale. I stared at the photos on my screen, thumb frozen mid-scroll, a hollow ache blooming in my chest. Sophie beamed in every frame, the perfect bride, the perfect life. my life, once. But I didn't call. I didn't go. Instead, I powered off my phone and sat in the silence. I was done being their ghost. Sophie might have won this round, but not me. Not anymore. The ache lingered, sharp and familiar. But I understood something now. The rain hadn't been an ending. It was the beginning. The storm had passed, but its shadow lingered. And yet for the first time I was breathing on my own terms. The city pulsed around me. Honking horns, hurried strangers, flashing lights, and for once I didn't feel invisible. I felt alive, tethered to something real. Nights blurred into long shifts at the diner, textbooks heavy in my arms as I rushed to class, exhaustion sinking into my bones. The classroom smelled of old chalk and burnt coffee, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a constant dare to quit. But every paper, every grade, was a brick laid firmly between me and the past I was leaving behind. One evening, as the last students filtered out, my professor stopped me. "Kate," she said, her voice clipped but kind, "you have something special. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. For the first time, I believed it. After graduation, I bet on myself. I opened a small photography studio, just exposed brick, creaky floors, and rent that made my stomach twist. But it was mine. Meanwhile, Sophie's life was everywhere. Perfect smiles, curated dinners, staged happiness. "Sophie's doing so well," Mom gushed over the phone, her voice honeyed with pride. "They're buying a house." I gripped the phone, the familiar ache curling deep, but this time I let it pass. No tears, no desperate, "What about me?" I simply hung up, the silence heavier than words. I turned back to my camera, losing myself in the lens. Broken sidewalks, lonely alley cats, the diner's flickering neon sign, all captured, all mine. Dawn found me photographing steam rising from coffee cups, the city waking slowly beneath a pale sky. Each shot felt like a piece of myself stitched back together. Ethan noticed. One night, watching me edit photos, he whispered, "You're different when you shoot free." I smiled, really smiled. "I feel free," I admitted, and for the first time it was true. But the past wasn't done with me. It clung like a shadow. Sophie's perfect life taunted me, filtered smiles, staged joy. Mom's comments bloomed beneath every post, heart emojis and praise like tiny paper cuts. But I stayed the course. I kept shooting, kept breathing. Then one night Ethan took me to a rooftop, the city sprawling beneath us, lights glittering like promises. The air smelled of rain not yet fallen. He kissed me slow, certain. "I love you," he said, steady, sure. My heart hammered against my ribs. "I love you too," I whispered, and I meant it. But fear threaded through the words, fear of fading, of losing. Still, in that moment I felt it. Light, finally finding me. But shadows don't fade so easily. The call came late. Leah. Her voice brittle. "Kate, Sophie's been talking about you, says you abandoned the family." I sighed, leaning against the kitchen counter, coffee scent lingering. "Let her," I said, my voice flat. "I'm done." But Leah's words stopped me cold. "She's not okay, Kate. Her marriage, it's falling apart." My pulse quickened. "Luke, he's miserable. Dead-end job. He complains. He's lost." Leah's voice faltered. "And Sophie, she's worse, mean, snapping at people, rolling her eyes at Mom. She's not the golden girl anymore." I stood there gripping the phone, the weight of it grounding me. Sophie had stolen everything. And now, piece by piece, it was slipping through her perfect manicured fingers, and for once, I didn't feel the urge to chase, to fix, to beg. I just let the silence stretch. I had my camera, my light, my life. And Sophie? Sophie was finally drowning in the very world she'd built. "It's like she's furious at the world now," Leah whispered, her voice laced with something between pity and resentment. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I knew that version of Sophie all too well, the golden girl who always won, who took Luke not because she loved him, but because she could, because in her mind he was always meant to be another trophy on her perfect little shelf. But now the shine was fading, and Sophie had no idea how to polish it back. Mom and Dad, blind as ever, still saw only the illusion. Leah told me about the family gatherings, their voices too loud, their smiles too wide as they gushed. "Sophie's doing amazing," Mom would beam, her eyes shining with pride. "She has everything." But Leah saw the cracks. "They've never really seen her," she said bitterly, "and they've never seen you." The words didn't sting because they hurt. They stung because they were true. The ache wasn't for Sophie. It was for the girl I used to be, the one who'd spent years clawing for their attention, begging silently for scraps of love, for just one moment of pride. I thought of that old science fair trophy gathering dust, of the dinners where my voice was swallowed whole, of the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering why I wasn't enough. And Luke, how he looked at Sophie like she was the sun while I became the shadow. But sitting there, listening to Leah, I realized something. I wasn't that girl anymore. Leah and I talked more after that. She carried her own scars, shaped by parents who pushed too hard, always comparing her to Sophie, always demanding more. "We're the invisible ones," she laughed bitterly one night, but there was no humor in it, just years of pain packed tight. Still, hearing it, I realized I wasn't as alone as I'd always felt. For the first time, I had someone who saw me, really saw me. We met at a little cafe that smelled like cinnamon and fresh muffins. She talked about her dreams, her fears, and one day, with her voice barely a whisper, she confessed, "I want to leave too, but I'm scared." I reached across the table, squeezing her hand tightly. "You can do it," I told her, and for once, I meant every word. "You're stronger than you think." Meanwhile, Sophie's perfect world kept cracking. Leah fed me pieces of it like breadcrumbs, small sharp truths that painted a picture of rot beneath the gloss. Luke came home later and later, his tie loose, his eyes hollow. "He's drinking more," Leah murmured one night. Sophie, on the other hand, spent like money grew on trees. Designer bags, expensive trips, spa days she couldn't afford, all to prop up the crumbling illusion. I could see it in my mind. Sophie draped in silk, hair perfect, that same brilliant smile fooling everyone. But beneath it, cracks, insecurity, decay. I told myself I didn't care, but I did. Not for her, never for her, but for the girl I once was, the one who lost everything to Sophie's selfishness. The difference now, I wasn't the one losing anymore. Ethan noticed the shift before I even spoke. "You're quiet," he said softly one night, the TV flickering in the dark as he pulled me close. His warmth, steady and grounding. "Leah called," I admitted. "Sophie's life, it's falling apart." He nodded, his gaze calm. "And how does that make you feel?" I sat with the question, letting the weight of it settle. Did I feel satisfied? Vindicated? Hollow? "I don't know," I whispered. Angry, sad, maybe relieved. Ethan kissed my forehead, slow and deliberate. "You don't have to feel anything," he murmured. "You don't owe her that." And he was right. I didn't. But the past didn't release its grip so easily. It still lingered, in Mom's gushing comments, in heart emojis splashed under Sophie's perfect pictures. Every reminder was a needle prick, small but sharp. Still, I refused to drown in it, so I kept going, kept shooting, kept breathing, kept living. And for the first time, I wasn't surviving in Sophie's shadow. I was building something of my own. One photo, one breath, one day at a time. Late at night, I wandered the city streets with my camera, chasing the way neon lights bled into empty sidewalks, how shadows stretched long and lonely down rain-slicked alleys. Every shutter click felt like reclaiming a part of myself I'd thought was lost. I didn't know it then, but that quiet strength I was building would soon be the only thing holding me together. The call came just after midnight, Leah's voice barely holding steady, static crackling like distant thunder. "Kate, Uncle Paul's gone." My grip tightened around the phone. "What?" The word barely made it past my lips. "Heart attack. The funeral's next week." I sat frozen, staring at my camera resting on the coffee table like it held answers. My chest tightened, air pressing heavy until the room felt too small to hold me. Grief, guilt, regret, all of it tangled in my throat. I hadn't seen Dad in years, hadn't exchanged more than hollow words in obligatory phone calls. And now, just like that, he was gone. Ethan watched me quietly, patient, waiting for me to speak. Should I go? My voice cracked, thin and raw. He reached out, his hand strong around mine, eyes steady. "Not for them," he said. "For you." For closure, I swallowed hard, my throat burning, and nodded. I wasn't ready, but I knew I had to. The drive to the funeral felt endless, the gray sky sagging low, clouds heavy with rain that hadn't yet fallen. Ethan drove, his hands steady on the wheel, the soft murmur of the radio filling the silence between us. I stared out the window, watching the world blur by, trees bending in the wind, power lines cutting across the sky like scars. My mind spun faster than the miles, dredging up old ghosts, every dinner where I was invisible, every science fair trophy left unnoticed. Every night I cried myself hollow, wondering why I was never enough. I thought about Luke, about Sophie, about that rain-soaked night I'd left it all behind. And then I thought about Dad, the man who never saw me, never cared enough to try. But there was something new nestled against the ache. Strength. I wasn't that girl anymore. The church reeked of lilies and incense, the air so thick it clawed down my throat. Mom sat rigid in the front pew, face pale and drawn, grief etched into every sharp line. Sophie perched beside her, pristine as ever, hands folded, eyes dry. I moved through the crowd like a ghost until I found my place. "Ethan," I called, my voice clear, cutting through the low murmurs. "Sit with me." The room stilled, Luke's face drained of color, his mouth twitching like he wanted to speak but didn't dare. Ethan stood, his suit crisp, his shoulders square as he crossed the aisle. He extended a hand to Luke, firm, unflinching. "Thanks for leaving, man," he said quietly, but everyone heard it. "You let go of the best woman in the world for this." Sophie's smile faltered, lips parting, but no words came. Her perfect facade splintered, eyes wide with something dangerously close to fear. Mom's hands clutched her purse tighter, knuckles white. She finally looked at me, really looked. I held her gaze, my voice steady, every word slicing clean. "Guess Sophie never told you, huh? You always said she deserved happiness. I hope you're satisfied." Silence fell, suffocating and absolute. The weight of my words pressed down on every corner of that church, filled every space they'd once used to drown me out. But this time, I wasn't invisible. I was heard. Ethan's fingers found mine, his grip grounding, warm. "Let's go," he murmured, his voice a quiet promise. We stood, turning our backs on the people who had once made me small, The door clicked shut behind us like a period at the end of a long, brutal sentence. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. My goodbye was done. To Dad, to the girl I used to be, to the life I'd finally broken free from. The road home stretched out beneath us, the sky dark and endless. Ethan's hand stayed steady on the wheel, the radio humming low like a lullaby. I watched the world pass by, felt the quiet hum of something unfamiliar. Peace. I thought of the funeral, of Mom's drawn face, Sophie's cracked mask, and I realized that for the first time I didn't care. I had survived the storm. I was standing on the other side. The next day, my phone rang. Then again, 56 missed calls before I finally answered. Mom's voice trembled, thick with something I'd never heard before. "Kate, please," she whispered. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please, forgive me." And for the first time, I wasn't the one begging. The phone felt like dead weight in my hand, every unanswered call vibrating with years of neglect I'd long since buried. I waited for anger to rise, or sorrow, or even the satisfaction I'd once dreamed of. But all I felt was bone-deep exhaustion. I'd carried their burdens too long. I exhaled slowly, my voice cold, steady, slicing through the silence like a blade. "Ask your golden girl," I said, words honed sharp enough to bleed. "She's the only one you ever cared about." And then, without another word, I hung up. The phone buzzed again and again, shrill, desperate, but I let it ring, let it echo through the empty apartment until it finally stopped. That evening Leah called. Her voice was careful, like she was holding something fragile that might shatter if she breathed too hard. "Kate, it's bad," she said, static cracking through the line. And just like that, I knew. The collapse had begun. Luke was unraveling, Leah explained, humiliated by Ethan's words, his pride shattered in front of everyone. Now he was bitter, drinking too much, coming home later and later, snarling at anyone who dared speak. I could see it. Luke slouched in his expensive suit, tie loose, eyes hollowed out by regret. The fire that once made him burn so bright was gone, replaced by smoldering resentment. "And Sophie?" I asked, my voice low. Leah sighed, a sharp exhale like it pained her. "She's desperate, Kate. Spending money they don't have, designer bags, luxury spas, trips they can't afford. She's drowning, but still clinging to the illusion of perfection." I sat there silent, my chest tight. I didn't want to care, but I did. Not for her, but for the girl I used to be, the one Sophie stole everything from. Leah's voice softened. "Mom's alone now. Her golden child's too busy chasing a fantasy to notice." There was no triumph in her words, only quiet recognition. "They're finally seeing the cracks, Kate, but it's too late." And in that moment I saw it so clearly. My mother, sitting in that empty house surrounded by echoes of everything she'd ignored. I thought of every dinner where I'd disappeared, every dusty science trophy no one noticed, every night I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering why I was never enough. I thought of Luke, of Sophie's smirk, of the night I walked away and never looked back, and I understood. I owed them nothing, not Sophie, not Mom, no one. I owed myself everything. Ethan noticed my silence as we sat on the couch that night, the dim flicker of the TV casting soft shadows across his face. "You're quiet," he murmured, his hand resting warm against mine. "What's wrong?" I leaned into him, letting his steady warmth pull me back from the edge. "Leah told me, Sophie's life is falling apart, and Mom, she's begging." My voice cracked, raw. Ethan nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "And how does that make you feel?" The question hung in the air, heavy with years of pain and unsaid words. I searched for the answer, buried beneath the anger, the grief, the endless loss. I don't know, I whispered. Angry, sad, relieved. Ethan pressed a kiss to my forehead, grounding me. You don't have to feel anything, he whispered. You don't owe them that. And for the first time, I believed him. I didn't. I never went back. Instead, I poured it all into something that was mine. I published my photography book that year, Unseen, a love letter to every soul who'd ever lived in someone else's shadow. The launch was small, intimate. Ethan, Leah, a few friends who knew my story. There was no fanfare, no cameras, but as I stood there, watching the pages filled with fragments of light and shadow, I felt whole. I had survived. I had thrived. Sophie's golden glow had dulled, her perfect world cracking for all to see. But me? I was still standing. I glanced at Ethan, at Leah, at the life I'd built from the ashes of everything they tried to destroy. And deep in my bones, I knew I had always been enough. Years later, a letter arrived, creased, delicate handwriting trembling across the page. I sat at the kitchen table, morning light soft around me. Kate, it read, I was wrong. I chose Sophie. And I lost you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I read it once, my throat burning, twice, until the words blurred. But all I felt was tired. I'd carried them for so long. I set the letter down, the paper cold under my fingertips. No tears came, no anger, because forgiveness wasn't about fixing what was already broken beyond repair. Sometimes it was simply about letting go, and I did. That night, my latest exhibition opened, walls lined with shadows and light, every fracture turned into art. The air buzzed with conversation, the soft clink of wine glasses, the faint hum of possibility. I stood there, surrounded by my work, by my truth, and for the first time I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. Ethan stood quietly beside me, his hand warm and steady in mine, his presence grounding like it always had been. Across the room, Leah laughed easily with a client, her voice rich, her eyes alive with a brightness I hadn't seen in either of us years ago. My family, I realized, not the one I was born into, but the one that chose me, the one that stayed. I stopped in front of a single photograph, framed and lit softly. It was me, small, maybe 8 or 9, tucked into the corner of the frame like she didn't belong. Wide eyes full of hope, a smile half-formed, hesitant, like she was waiting for someone to see her. I stared at that girl, felt the ache of old wounds I thought had long since healed. The science fair trophy no one noticed. The rain that night Luke left, the weight of a mother's indifference, the sharp gleam of Sophie's constant triumph. But as I stood there, staring at that fragile version of myself, something shifted. A slow, warm smile spread across my face. You're not invisible anymore, I whispered so only I could hear, my chest filling with a warmth that burned away the last of the shadows. I thought of everything that led me here, the diner, the long nights with my camera, the first time Ethan's eyes saw me, truly saw me. I thought of the kids we'd lifted up, the dreams we'd built, the life that was mine, completely, undeniably mine. And for the first time I felt it fully, the power, the quiet kind that comes from surviving, from rebuilding, from rising when no one thought you could. I turned toward Ethan, toward Leah, toward the life I had created from the ruins they left me, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones. I had always been enough. The storm was long gone, and I was still standing, stronger, brighter, free. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, give it a thumbs up so others can find it too. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this, and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next one.